Welcome to Bunch Formation, forever your newest college football podcast. My name is Chris Vannini. He is David Ubben. We've got a special episode of the show for you today. Joining the bunch, Connor Stalions, the former Michigan analyst, infamous sign stealer, star of a Netflix documentary. He is joining the show today on a special episode. If you're new to the show, please subscribe to this new show that David and I have started for the last couple of months. We're touching on all things college football, previews, picks, all kinds of stuff. It's been a lot of fun. The show's been growing like crazy. So if you're new, please continue to follow the show. A warning, the video quality, if you're watching this episode on YouTube, the video quality with Connor is not great. For whatever reason, when we would record, it would be off sync and not great. We couldn't make it work, but the audio is totally fine. If you're listening to that, it's all good. We appreciate Connor's time and kind of dealing with that. David, how you doing, man?
Still tired, Chris. I gotta tell you, my body's still recuperating from. Listen, the trip was fun, but like literally, I went to bed after 3 a.m. like almost every night, and I was having to get up at like 8:30 or 9 like almost every day, and my body was not letting me sleep beyond that. My circadian rhythms right now look like somebody stole their signs and just knows what's happening, and they can't get anything back in rhythm, so it's tough.
Yeah,
it's tough.
David Ubben, who went to 6 college football games in 5 days over week 1. That story may be up now on The Athletic. If not, it'll be up pretty soon. And if you're watching, you can see that Dave is in his new office.
We're here. We did
filled
it,
out.
Chris.
So
I won't turn the camera around because we're not fully operational, but for the purposes of the show, we're back. I'm no longer in a car on the side of the highway. I'm no longer in a tiny Airbnb, just a regular house. So, it's great.
So our talk with Connor Stalions, he gets into a lot. We talk about the NCAA penalties against him and the allegations, some of which he didn't want to talk about because he's going through an appeal, but quite a bit he did talk about. He talks about being on the sideline at the Michigan State Central Michigan game. That NCAA investigation is still ongoing. We talk about how sign stealing works, what other schools are doing, similar things to him or even differently. His own future, what he's up to now, his thoughts on Michigan, Oklahoma. He's actually going to be at the game. I'm going to be at the game too on Saturday. We talk about the break down those two teams in that game. We talk about how Michigan is recruiting at a whole new level now with everybody kind of on the same page. And, if he thinks this whole thing was worth it, because he went through a lot the last couple of years and couldn't say some things, did say some things, and his kind of life got turned upside down. So we go into a lot, and I think people should listen to this whole thing because we do touch on a lot of things and stuff pops up in and out. We will have timestamps in the show notes to the various topics we discuss if you want to jump ahead, but I really recommend you listen to the full thing. I thought it was very insightful and kind of his mindset through all of this. So with that, it's time to talk to Connor Stalions. And we are happy to be joined by the infamous Connor Stalions. Connor, welcome to the bunch. Thanks for being here.
Appreciate you guys. Glad to be here.
First question. I grew up in Michigan. A lot of bodies of water in that state. Which pond did you throw the phone in? That was one of the things that
yeah, I'll plead the fifth on what pond my phone is in.
I'm gonna get some scuba gear, Chris.
Yeah. So
just start. I'd like to see you start scuba diving in every single pond within a 50-mile radius of Ann Arbor.
So the NCAA penalties against you and Jim Harbaugh in Michigan came out a couple weeks ago. Any general reaction to that and what it means?
Yeah, still be pretty careful with what I say just because I understand the appeals process is still ongoing. But I guess the most I'll say as of now is the wording in their report is very it's very carefully worded, and there's a lot that's left out. So very, very selective in how they worded everything. So we'll see how the appeals process goes, but and then obviously now, there's even more news being released, to the day. So we'll kind of TBD on that.
But safe to say, Connor, that because there is an appeals process, that you disagreed with probably the fairness of some of the penalties.
Yeah, without getting into too many details, they don't really address the actual bylaw that was investigated, and they're very unclear, and they omit a lot of information about, how credible their information is, and it seemed very selective, selective enforcement. But we'll see how the appeals goes.
So that bylaw, I assume you mean the scouting bylaw. Like sign stealing is not against the rules, and both Ubben and I have talked to coaches about it.
Still going on, probably even more to this day.
Yeah, I want to get into that later too. But like, were you just? I mean, do you think you were better at it than most people doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think a few things that went on in my process, my mind, and when I was deciphering an opponent's signals in a game is, first and foremost, the signalers are only taught how to signal. They're not taught how to fake signal. And it's really not rocket science. When you think about it, like, okay, well, these 18-year-olds on the field are, it's got to be simple enough for them in the heat of the moment when the bullets are flying and they're tired and they look over to the sideline. It can't be complex. And the first thing I realized early, like back in the 2015, is coaches are more nervous about miscommunicating with their players than they are protecting their own signals. So, once you kind of simplify it from that standpoint and then reverse engineer, okay, well, who are the players looking at? Well, that guy's the live signaler. And then 9 times out of 10, most teams are going to know what the signals mean, no matter what, because you're just talking to other teams, and the getting the signals meaning is not the complicated part. It's usually figuring out which of the 5 signalers sometimes is live, and there's multiple ways to do that. And usually it's as simple as just, rather than watching the signalers, watching the players, see who they're looking at. Yeah. Like, for example, the near receiver closest to their sideline, he's looking, he's only 5 yards from the 5 signalers. Well, if his body's facing this way, you're assuming he's not looking at the signaler over there. He's looking at the guy he's facing. So, the figuring out who's live is the big part, right? And then after that, it's how quickly can you process the information. So I know the documentary actually did a really good job of showing how I organized everything and was able to memorize pictures instead of words. So that was, I'd say the way I organize things, I would assume, is probably better than most. And that enabled me to be able to relay, what I see in real time.
What percentage of schools that you looked at would rotate the dummy signalers?
Some schools, like ironically, Ohio State didn't change who was live the entire season until I think it was halftime of our game. And
which game? The 23 game?
The 22, because I wasn't there. I wasn't there by the time we played them in 23. But 2022, they had the same guy that was live every single game. If I talked to another team, any other Big Ten team that played them, they're like, oh yeah, so and so, this guy was the guy the whole game. And then going into our game, I'm thinking like, all right, well, they're going to change this up against us, and they didn't until halftime. Then I realized like, okay, yeah, now they're going to change it up, and they did. But some teams change each possession. Some teams change each quarter. Some teams at halftime they'll come out wearing different colors and they change something, or the best way to do it. So there was one team, I think I can say this. I mean, props to them. East Carolina was by far the best team at protecting their signals. They changed in the middle of drives, and I'm not gonna get into how they did it. They are geniuses. I figured it out in about the third quarter. But oh yeah, there'd be like, they only had 2 signalers, and they had a board behind them. The board would change each play. Essentially, the board was telling the players which signaler is live, which takes a lot of practice. But they were the most impressed by far in how they protected their stuff. They would, a first down, it'd be one guy, and then all of a sudden the next play would be a different guy. And sometimes the board would stay the same, and the guy would be a different guy. So they were really good at it. But yeah, it ranges from anywhere from changing mid-drive to never changing all season.
And
Shout
it
out
was
to Mike Houston.
Yeah, well, didn't work well enough because he got fired last year. I mean, it was known. I mean, it was known that Michigan got its signals stolen a ton up until after COVID. So, but like the NCAA said, in its report that however valuable you think people think sign stealing was or wasn't, that the lengths you and Michigan went to do it, to obfuscate it, prove that there was value in it. And the NCAA said we'll never know the true extent ultimately of the operation. Do you agree with that connotation? Would you say you went farther than other people in getting those signals?
So I'll be careful with what I say, just because of the whole appeals process. But yeah, I didn't invent the way I got signals. There are many teams in the country who did everything the same as I did, and some that even go further. I'd say the first thing you hinted at about Michigan getting their signals stolen, the question keeps coming up, well, how much of an advantage, competitive advantage is it? And the thing that people have to realize, I know that we talked about with how signal deciphering even goes on probably more now, in that I know I released that video on Twitter about the way that the play is communicated. It has nothing to do with helmet comms. It's about tempo. And to truly understand the competitive advantage, or what I would say really competitive balance, is you have to understand how the plays are communicated and the history of that, because defenses are at a disadvantage significantly, because if the offense goes up tempo, the defense has to signal their play. The offense can control if the defense can huddle and communicate the play verbally amongst the players, or if they have to signal to all 11 players. So if the offense is already lined up in a formation, the defensive coordinator has no choice but to signal to all 11 players at the same time. So there are many college football offenses that take advantage of, I'd say manipulate that tempo. They use that tempo to their advantage. And it's usually, some teams it's to go fast, right? Like, think back to like Oregon, pre 2011, it was, they're snapping the ball within 7 seconds of the previous play. Well, it evolved into a lot of offenses going up tempo for the sole purpose of getting the defense to signal their play. So what an offense would do is they would go fast, just signal their formation to force the defense to communicate their play. And then the offense would use that information and finish their play call. So essentially they're only signaling their pre-snap information. They're getting a line, looking across the sideline. Oh, okay, they're in cover 4. And then they finish their post-snap information and call their cover 4 beater in that example.
Yeah.
So, as far as competitive advantage, there is no, it's pretty much impossible to have a competitive advantage from a defensive perspective. It's you're trying to create competitive balance from teams stealing your signals, because at the end of the day, an offense, if they really care about signals, they're just going to huddle, or if they're protecting their signals, they're just going to huddle. They're going to wristband their plays, like Georgia. Every player has a wristband. And so even when they want to go relatively up tempo, they just signal in a number and they look at the wristband. So there's nothing you can do about that. So, it's no offense to the NCAA or, anyone making the decisions, but they're not really knowledgeable about the game of football and how the X's and O's, the cat and mouse game. And, one thing I will say, because this is, they went public with this back in mid-October of 23, is right away they said that the NCAA knew and could prove X, Y, and Z. Right. So if they knew it and could prove it, then and as I experienced throughout the whole process, it seemed like it was a conclusion and they were just investigating to confirm their conclusion. It wasn't actually, investigating to figure something out. They had a conclusion up front and they wanted to prove it even further, even though they said they could already prove it. And I think that just goes to show, and you can see in the wording of the report, that they did not consider anything about the actual game of football and how plays are communicated and the actual effect on the game itself. So yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest thing for me is just before anyone. Everyone's very opinionated, and I know this is a very polarizing, investigation. But to have a legitimate opinion, you have to understand how teams are actually communicating their play, and when it's an advantage and when it's not. And yeah, so to answer the question about competitive advantage and relative to other teams, if I were doing this for Michigan's offense, this would be a different discussion. Right? Then that'd be, oh yeah, we're using their play every time, and we're running a cover one beater against cover one or a cover two beater against cover two. But Michigan's offense huddled more than I think all but two teams in the country. So
You mentioned, a lot of teams went further than you guys did. What does that mean? What does that look like to go further than what your operation looked like?
There's a few teams that, for example, the one thing that, me and my attorneys have said before is, the term sign stealing and the notion that I stole something, right?
The idea being the allegations that using tickets to film sidelines, like that is obviously what was alleged against you. So
but the
that
term,
type of stuff and further than that,
yeah. So the term sign stealing, it insinuates that something's being stolen, when in reality, you're signaling in front of 100,000 people, right? Millions on TV. There's nothing that's being stolen. It's just being deciphered. There are teams that I've seen this with my own eyes. I know there's rumors and reports out there, but I've seen from multiple people who claim they got it from a certain school that there's teams that have film of another team's signals from like within their quarterback room. So like most teams have their grad assistants film their signals in the QB room or the linebacker room or whatever, and they upload it to Catapult, and so their players can study what the signals mean. There are 100% there are teams out there that have that film, right? So, and then I know there's teams that have other teams' practice film, and so the argument that the NCAA, I guess in this case, is making is, oh, you have unauthorized film of something that's being signaled in front of 100,000 people. Well, then is it really unauthorized?
Right. And that rule
the
is
further part is the
yeah.
teams that have practice film and film of your signals, privately filmed, that no one in the world has access to outside of the couple players, that you're sharing it with.
Yeah. And during that whole time, we were given tips on different people having things and have investigated and haven't been able to prove certain things out. So that's why we haven't named other stuff and stuff like that. And so like you want to name any of the schools or no?
I'm good.
Okay. I figured I'd ask. The NCAA said that you were on the sideline of Michigan State, Central Michigan. You said in your NCAA interview you couldn't recall. It's in the Netflix documentary. Looks like you've got the goatee back a little bit right now. Which do you prefer, the goatee or clean shaven typically?
No, I've had the facial hair since I left the Marine Corps.
Do you have a pair of Meta Ray-Ban glasses that may or may not?
No, there are so many conspiracies and rumors that started from that. The one thing I'll say, and I know there's been reports recently that came out about why I was there, and Central asked me to be there to help because they still have an ongoing investigation. I probably shouldn't get too much into it, but I mean, yeah. First of all, the NCAA in that interview that's on Netflix, they were asking a series of questions that had nothing to do with Central Michigan or that game, and they ran the question they asked right before that was like way out of left field, and I answered how I answered, and then between that time and the actual hearing, we had submitted to the NCAA, exactly why I was there. I've never denied me being at that game. So we submitted that to the NCAA. They know exactly why I was at that game. So, and I know there's been reports that, you just add 2 and 2 and you can get to the conclusion. But I went into that game with more information than I left. I guess that's the most that I'll say about that right now until their investigation's over.
One notable thing, Chris Partridge, former Michigan assistant out with the Seahawks, he was basically exonerated, and that allegations were not substantiated against him. What did you make of that as someone who worked with him?
First of all, I think me personally, going back to October, whatever it was, 19th, 20th,
real quick, sorry. So the allegations against him being that he directed people to lie to the NCAA or dealt with evidence, or they didn't know if he was involved in your operation or not, but the allegations that he told people to lie to the NCAA and all that stuff were not substantiated.
And he was, this is in the report too, he was also alleged to have privately worked out recruits and give recruits gear. I think he had, I don't remember, 2 or 3 other allegations that he received 0 violations for. So, I go back to 2023 with him. Other than obviously me personally, selfishly, seeing all these articles being written about me and me being cut off from 99% of the people in my life, that was tough. But the worst part for me was seeing him, who had Coach Partridge had nothing to do with how I deciphered signals, anything in the signal world. He was the linebackers coach, and the extent of our professional relationship was me helping him with the linebackers, prep linebacker meetings and whatnot. And so when I saw him get fired, that was the most confusing time in all this, because you read the reports of destroying evidence and telling players to lie. Well, he wouldn't have known anything to tell players to lie about, and then there was nothing for him to destroy. So that was very odd from my perspective, not being able to talk to him, not being able to talk to anyone at Michigan. So that was definitely frustrating at the time. And then fast forward to now, coming out of the hearing and coming out of the NCAA's, the COI's findings, this gets into again, I'm going to be careful what I say. And I understand that. I mean, there's an article the other day that came out about, as I read it, more focused on him. The credibility or lack of credibility of the NCAA's sources, which is essentially the lack of credibility of the investigation itself. And so how does someone get fired for all those allegations and then be completely exonerated with no explanation?
What's your understanding of why he was fired then?
Well, my understanding is there was a source, that the NCAA had via an interview or whatever the case may be, and he was all those rumors that leaked back in 2023 about whether it was him destroying evidence or him telling people to lie. That came from a source who's not credible, and he was quickly fired. And I also understand that, Michigan, Michigan can't investigate me during an NCAA investigation. They can't investigate Chris Partridge. They can't do, they're in the dark, right? Everyone's in the dark. In fact, I don't really know if this is public, but the NCAA didn't reach out to me until January of 24. So we're all in the dark on what's going on, and whatever happened, he gets fired within, a short amount of time. From my understanding, it was no notice, nothing. And I'm speculating when I say this, but if Michigan can't investigate on their own, then I would imagine they were told something, right, by the NCAA, and then they fired him. Well, if now the NCAA is saying that was a not credible source, then what happened? So I don't know, right?
So
I was in the dark.
So what happened? The timeline of events. So a private investigation firm brings information to the NCAA. The NCAA shares some of that with the Big Ten because it was in season. The Big Ten makes the decision to suspend Jim Harbaugh. I believe were you fired or resigned? I don't remember.
I was suspended for a week or so and then resigned.
Okay, yeah.
At some point,
and there remain unanswered questions as to how the NCAA got that information tipped off by the firm. The NCAA would not say. We asked them in the press conference after they announced the penalties about concerns over whoever this tipster was. And the NCAA would say that any of those, any allegations that were substantiated elsewhere were then penalized for. And ones that were not, such as Chris Partridge. So Michigan's decision to fire Chris Partridge, separate from, I guess, the NCAA, would seem, in terms of the NCAA hadn't penalized him yet, because they obviously are a very long process. There has been this belief, rumors, haven't reported anything yet that we have, that tip came from inside the program in some form. What do you think about that, and how much of where this all started do you kind of think about?
Yeah, I think that topic is a hot topic on the appeals process and what's to come of this. So I can't really comment on that topic, but I do think that when you put all this together, like just for the general viewer, and you look back to the Chris Partridge topic that we just discussed, and then you combine that with the question you just asked, there are a lot of questions to be answered, right? And that feed into the credibility of the entire investigation as a whole. So I'll leave it at that. But there are a lot of questions that still need to be answered, and then I think that will clear up and clarify a lot of confusion, right, throughout the whole process.
No bowl ban for you guys, which obviously anybody who's been following the NCAA in recent years kind of knew that was coming. Nothing vacated. But what did you make of the Ohio State reaction to the penalties that Michigan did get, or rather did not get?
I try to stay away from social media as much as possible. I have fun with it, but
you did offer to give Dave Portnoy some tickets to
yes that offer still stands, but the whole narrative that Ohio State has run with, right, their fan base, I'd imagine their identity is blaming external circumstances and not realizing, not just accepting that football is man on man, win your matchup, right? Like, I mean, it's not rocket science. So for a team to, like, especially last year's game, 23 was, what was that, 2 versus 3 at the time, or 1 versus 2? Correct. And it was a good game. And, people are going to say what they want, but I mean, I was eight weeks removed or whatever at the time.
Also, Jim, I've always made the case, like, you weren't there, Jim Harbaugh wasn't there. There's no, like,
the cards were
they had
completely in Ohio State's favor to win that game.
I have made the case that the strongest penalty Michigan ended up getting from all this may have actually been Jim Harbaugh being suspended for the Penn State game and the Ohio State game, because Penn State and Ohio State were given the opportunity to end Michigan's national championship run.
Correct. Yep.
And they didn't.
Yep.
And then to follow it up with last year's game where they're the big underdog and they win, that was a shot. That was a shot.
I mean, yeah, last year's game. And I say this too about, like, Ohio State. Now, obviously, I don't like Ohio State, but I mean, legitimately, props to them for responding and winning the national championship, right? Like, that's not easy to do, given the circumstances and the, I'm sure the media focus on them as a program, and oh my gosh, they can't win the big game, and then all of a sudden they followed up with 5 straight top 10 wins. I mean, that props to them. But the actual Michigan game itself, I mean, that was a bigger upset than 1969. So,
yeah, I
mean, it kind of, when we transition to the Oklahoma game this week, it's like an identity game, right? Like Michigan, Ohio State. I think it's gonna be the same thing, Michigan, Oklahoma, where Oklahoma, similar to Ohio State, they are used to throwing the ball around left and right. That's what they face in practice. Their defense is very sound, but also very complementary to an up-tempo offense that likes to throw the ball. And so when you see, like, Ohio State, Michigan, it's clearly Michigan's identity is to run the ball first, and Ohio State's identity is in their passing game. There's nothing wrong with that, but when those two separate identities collide, usually the running team wins. In fact, I think the team that has had the most rushing yards in that game since 2000 has won every single season. So,
yeah,
we're going on hopefully 25 straight years of that, being upheld, where the team who runs the ball for more yards wins the game. And then it gets into, does Ryan Day feel like he needs to run the ball and quote, beat Michigan at their own game? And you kind of see the dilemma they're in on, how much, do we really try to pound the rock in the trenches, or do we lean on Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, and so on? And clearly it's like a monkey on their back that they. I mean, again, I'm not a fan of Ohio State, but I respect them as a talented team, and they every year, it's funny and it's fun, Michigan 4 straight and going on 5. I'd be careful about that if I'm Michigan, right? Like, it's not a gimme. Anyone can win this game every year. But it's the funny part to me is more so how Ohio State reacts in the in everything else. Like, they're suing the Brown Jug for having Buckeye tears as one of their alcoholic beverages. They're trying to make planting a flag a felony. They're trying to, it's like all those little things. It's so petty, and it obviously fuels guys like Dave Portnoy to just run with it.
Connor, I feel like you don't like Ohio State that much. That's my theory.
Obviously, I don't like Ohio State, but like, the competitor in me, people say, like, respecting the game of football. To me, that's every single game is 2 teams, and there's one winner, and 1 divided by 2 is 50%. So there's a 50% chance you win, right? So respecting the game to me is respecting the fact that your opponent has a 50% chance to win the game, and nothing's a gimme. And I'm just very like the coaching side in me is very careful of having fun with narratives and whatnot, because you can fall into that trap of just assuming because you won the last 4 games you're going to win the 5th one. I mean, that's how winning streaks end, right? Just in that mindset.
Connor, I got to ask you. So I just moved to Charlotte from Knoxville. I covered Tennessee from 18 to 21. I was not at the South Carolina game in 2022, but it's a very popular theory because obviously you guys did buy a ticket to the Tennessee game that you or someone associated with you had given South Carolina Tennessee's signals before that game when they scored 63 points, derailed Tennessee's championship run. What do you make of that theory? Any legitimacy to it?
One of the dozens of conspiracies that are out there. I have never had a discussion with any SEC team. There's one. I've had one discussion in my life with an SEC team regarding signals, and that was back in, I believe, 2019 when we played Alabama in the Citrus Bowl, and like, teams trade signals, and it was one of those where I forget what the SEC team was, but they were playing most SEC Big Ten, bowl games. There's usually 4 of them every bowl season, and I don't know who it was, but someone was probably playing like a Wisconsin or a Penn State, and I say, hey, well, I have their stuff if you have Bama stuff, and made a little trade. I've not talked to I've never met anyone at South Carolina. I'll also say this about Tennessee too. Joe Milton, I'd ask Joe Milton and Hendon Hooker. They know the truth, and they. I'm tight with both of them. There was no trying to screw over Tennessee. I'll also say this. I guess my third point is, let's just say I had everything on a team. Why would I not want to play them in the playoffs? Why would I?
It's true.
Like, I'd rather.
You want them to win if you have this.
Yeah. If I had everything on Tennessee, which I've never watched any Tennessee film to try to decipher signals. I do know they're up tempo, and I'm not going to speculate on whether they steal signals or not. I don't know. I don't know much about Tennessee other than the fact that they're very, wide splits, up-tempo team, snapping the ball within 8 seconds of the previous play. But in theory, it could be Tennessee, it could be anyone. If I had a team signals and felt so confident that it's this competitive advantage that's going to cause whatever the margin was in that South Carolina game, why would I want another team to do it rather than us?
Yeah, but you guys were scouting teams ahead of time in the play that would be in the playoff hunt, correct? Well, I say scouting, purchasing tickets to go decipher signals.
I mean, well, first of all, that's not, even if I myself was at those games, that wouldn't be against the rules.
Sure.
You saw like Ohio State asked the college football playoff if they could be at the Michigan TCU game, and college football playoff said yeah. So Ohio State had people at our game.
That is kind of weird because the playoff is kind of changing because it is. I believe that's allowed in the NFL, but it's not.
Oh, it's allowed in the NFL.
It's
in high
not
school.
in college. It's not in college football. That's the.
It's only college football for the opponents on your schedule from the beginning of the season.
Yeah,
and it's only for an institutional staff member. So I can't go to a, say, Ohio State, Michigan State game.
Yeah. So what's next for you now? You did some high school coaching last year. How are you moving forward with your life? What do you want to do in coaching? Like what are you up to now?
Yeah. Right now I'm waiting on a couple different NFL teams. No, the Chargers are not one of them. And my understanding is there's, first of all, the timing of everything with the NCAA was a little unfortunate for me personally, just because it was on the tail end of camp, right? So put yourself in the shoes of an NFL GM or owner, and you're not going to want to make a hire for a, say, quality control or, assistant, whatever, before that decision came out, right? Because that would just draw a bunch of PR. So now I might have to wait a season, right? Which, again, personally is unfortunate, but I'm patient. I'll be fine. So right now I'm just helping out a few different players in the background in the league and waiting on, a couple teams as hopefully the PR shifts a little bit and, and or dies down, and then, we can move on. But yeah, so right now I'm just occupying myself by helping out some guys in the background, and we'll see.
A big game this weekend, Michigan, Oklahoma. You're planning to be there as a former coach.
So is Chris.
Yes,
and Chris. It's
I'll
always
be there.
interesting. Like
he's just going as a fan, just like he did.
Yeah, Chris and I are going to sit together unless he's on the field. Then I'm not going to be on the field.
Yeah, but I did it in bed with Chattanooga's staff in like 2019, and I watched film with them all week, and seeing them break down a game was interesting. The coaching side of you, what are you most looking for in this game?
Yeah, I'm not a bettor. But I did see that the spread is like 5.5. I think that's interesting. I think Vegas often gets caught up in like, I don't know, recency bias or whatever you want to call it. When at the end of the day, I kind of hinted at it before. This is an identity matchup, right? Or Oklahoma is used to, I don't want to say track meets, but they're used to playing in open space. They're used to, defending 10 and 11 personnel out of nickel personnel. They're used to, when I watch Oklahoma's defense, which is very, like, Venables is legit, right? Very good defensive coordinator.
Been doing it a while.
Yeah. But like when I watch their defense, their strength is their back end. They're really good in open space. They want to get you in 3rd and long. Right. And then they throw all these exotics at you. And I don't want to say problem, because at the end of the day, Michigan's got to exploit it successfully. But it's that identity clash where Well, Michigan's not going to get in 3rd and long too much, right? It's up to them. They're pounding the rock. They're getting in 12, 21 personnel, sometimes 22 personnel. I'm interested to see if Oklahoma stays in, 4-2-5 or 4-3, or do they add a 5th defensive lineman to counter 22 personnel, 12 personnel, defending. And I know, both Michigan and Oklahoma's matchup last week, Illinois State, New Mexico, I'm sure neither side was showing too much, but defending an 11 personnel team in Illinois State with a tight end who is not a Max Bredesen or Marlon Klein type of, really going to get you in the run game. Their defensive line, I think this game's going to come down to Oklahoma's defensive line. Can they stuff the run? Can they control their gaps and not rely on? They like to do a lot of you call them like pirate stunts or whatever in the run game, where the nose will play the A gap, the tackle's got the other A gap, and then he loops around if it's a run to just try to confuse the blocking scheme of the run game. But that you can't depend on that against Michigan. That's not going to, Michigan's going to gash you if that's what you're doing against them. So at the end of the day, they have to, Oklahoma's defense, their D line is going to have to, they're going to have to stop the run. And now this year, this is where Bryce comes in. You can't just go one high, rotate the safety down, and have 8 in the box to stop the run, because you have to respect what Bryce can do in the RPO game, in the play action game, in the quick game, drop back, all of it. Bryce is, obviously he's the number 1 recruit in the country for a reason. And you saw flashes of it in the New Mexico game. Again, I think the play calling was great, but I think it was very bland from the standpoint of we're going to save a lot for this week. And so I think, I think Bryce definitely puts defenses in a dilemma. And if you don't have a really solid, deep defensive line, you're going to have to make a decision. Do we sell out and stop the run, or do we respect Bryce? And me personally, knowing Bryce, I'd probably not say I dare you to beat us with Bryce Underwood, but I don't know if they have a choice.
So on the other side,
and the O-line, and Jordan Marshall, that's.
I do like Michigan's running game in this. The other side is Michigan's defensive line against Oklahoma's offensive line last year was a mess. A lot of injuries. They didn't run the ball very well against Illinois State. Something like 3-something yards per carry. And you've got, I think that the big freshman that they like, I don't think he played last week. He'll be going against Michigan's defensive line. Like, that's where I see this. What do you see about John Mateer, Jaden Ott, the new Oklahoma offense versus what Michigan's trying to do on defense?
Yeah, not to get into too many details on that side, but Michigan's defense is very rarely going to allow a game to turn into a track meet, right? They're gonna, and I personally, from the fan in me, views like the mixed fan / coach mind in me views this last week against New Mexico as almost a blessing in disguise, where they have quite a bit to clean up right from the week 1 rust. But that Wink wasn't showing too much, wasn't showing too many exotics, wasn't tipping his hand. And I'll say that Michigan is very deep up front, like you said. Their D line, Oklahoma's offensive line. I think most people would say, yeah, Michigan's defensive line is legit. Their front 7 is legit. I do think their depth at DB is lacking a little bit, and they have some stuff to clean up on the back end and the coverage from last week. But they'll clean it up, and Mateer is really good. This is the one thing I'll say about that matchup, Oklahoma's offense, Michigan's defense, is Michigan's defense, the scheme is designed to make up for any deficiency from a talent standpoint. And Michigan's defensive scheme, which Wink is the godfather of the whole system, right? It's the same thing that the Chargers run, the Seahawks run, the Ravens run. And there's multiple college teams now that are running it because all these assistants from this tree that go take a job somewhere. And so it's the most complex scheme because of the way that the plays in the terminology is categorized. They can pretty much run anything out of any look against anything. And so ask JJ, ask Bryce. I promise you. Now, obviously, I wasn't at camp this year for Bryce, but I did watch JJ in fall camp against Michigan's defense. And I do think that Michigan's defense in fall camp prepared JJ more for the NFL than any college game that he played, because you have no idea what you're going to get post-snap based on the pre-snap look in Michigan's scheme. So, if they show one high, there's still a 50% chance it's a too high call. And if they show too high, there's a 50% chance it's a one high call. There's really no tells or, alignment giveaways that, within the scheme. So it's very complex. I mean, there'll be plays where they'll show a post safety, they'll rotate the other safety down, and then the nickel will play the deep half, and the corner will play the other deep half, and the post safeties, the middle read player. There's no, most teams, especially in college football, definitely in high school, when you see a one high pre-snap, it's going to be one high post-snap. And there's going to be a lot of confusion for Mateer. Not saying he's not going to get it done. You're right. He's very talented, and they very well could, put up some points. But I think what I'm saying is it's going to be a test schematically that he hasn't faced. In the meantime, it's a schematic test that he's never faced, while having a very deep defensive line and edge rushers running at him, at the same time. So
feels like when I face Ubben here in college football 26. He's always this guy.
I try to make the same stuff look different and different stuff look the same.
He does. And I play with Oklahoma and can confirm Mateer is a lot of fun. A few things before you got to go. Michigan, landing Bryce Underwood, taking him from LSU. There had been people had said under Jim Harbaugh, Michigan kind of wasn't going to that full recruiting game that other people were. And now under Sharon Moore, they have the champion circle. Everything is like, they're all working on all cylinders now. They're like fully operational, that whole recruiting thing in terms of legally paying players and doing all this stuff to get the number one recruit like Bryce Underwood. Obviously you're not in the program anymore, but is it your understanding and feeling that Michigan has kind of fully tapped into things in a way that they never quite have before?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, not just for Michigan, but I know, you being from the state and knowing the Midwest well, pre-NIL, call it right 2020 and before, all of these up north teams, so to say, didn't have any infrastructure to pay players. And call this conspiracies or not. I mean, it is what it is, where teams down south had the infrastructure to pay players. You read all the stories of McDonald's bags and whatnot. And so their donors down south were already paying recruits. And now that it's above table, the SEC teams go from paying below the table to above the table. And there's really no change, right? But the teams in the Midwest had to adapt, and it takes time, right? You got to convince donors, hey, rather than putting your money here, can you put your money here? And I think what you're seeing now is a 2 to 3 year delay in these teams that definitely have the alumni base to afford NIL. They're starting to not just catch up, but overtake a lot of teams, with the exception of like the Texas schools and the Miamis and stuff like that. But Nike.
Well, I mean, look, AJ McCarron said the other day that Alabama's only paying $20 million. They're apparently
broke boys out here.
They're boring. Can't get any talent, even though they have the most 5-stars in the country.
Correct.
Talent
But
efficiency in Alabama. That's the issue.
I did talk I've talked to Big Ten collectives, in the last couple of years, and they had always said that the culture within the Big Ten and donors was, once you win, then we will donate and pay and do this stuff. While down south, it was, we will pay to win and hope it works out on the back end. And so Nebraska was one that was kind of ahead of things, and but a lot of them did kind of seem behind. And it feels like Michigan, based on talking to other schools, everybody else is saying Michigan's doing it.
I can see that.
Level. Yeah,
David, definitely behind. But now that they're caught up, and obviously too, you get a guy like Bryce Underwood. I mean, that alone helps recruiting receivers and offensive weapon. I mean, everyone, right? Because everyone buys into surrounding a talented team around a very talented quarterback, right? And I think Venables said that Bryce reminds him of Trevor Lawrence. I'm assuming he's insinuating like a guy being this impactful this early, right? And recruits see that, right? So recruits see that, oh wow, this might change things schematically the way that Michigan, and Bryce has said this too. We're still going to run the ball, still gonna go 12 personnel, 21, 22 personnel, and test you in the run game. But now, hey, you got to respect this. The more weapons you surround Bryce with, it's like a snowball effect where then the easier it is to recruit. So yeah.
I think this is the 17th year I've covered this sport. And anytime there's a rule change or anytime anything's changing in the sport, my first instinct is, all right, how are they going to skirt the rules here? And you're understanding, are there new ways that you're seeing rules, whether they be written or unwritten, being broken as schools are trying to get an edge and do everything they can to get in the playoff and win it? Obviously, the hunger and the stakes have never been higher.
In regards to what topic are we talking? Like
whatever. If you
recruiting signals,
anything.
I'm in the recruiting side. I'm interested to see how the whole. Obviously, when they opened up NIL, they opened it up to the Wild West, right? And that's what you're seeing now. And they're trying to get some sort of regulations. I'm interested to see legally. I mean, I'm no attorney, but can you legally tell a company, you can only pay X amount for a commercial appearance or whatnot? So,
right.
I just have a hard time believing that they're going to actually regulate NIL, because
can tell you collectives feel the same way too, that they don't know if the Collegiate Sports Commission, the CSC, that has to approve those rules or approve those NIL deals that are outside of revenue sharing. We've already seen some pushback on whether or not collectives can do that. The CSC relented. What happens when one of them sues over? Who's to say I can't pay this kid X amount of money?
Correct. And I think now that the Midwest up north teams are playing this game, I have a hard time believing it's ever going to change, right?
Yeah.
It's always going to happen. And even if they do regulate, so they'll find a way to pay through, hey, do this commercial, we'll pay you more, we'll pay even more for the commercial or the signing event or whatever the case is. And then, as far as, the hot topic of signal stealing, advanced scouting, and all that. I've said it before, the giving a quarterback and a linebacker or a safety the coach to quarterback comms is not a solution. It's taking one step forward and 3 steps back. You're enabling now coaches to just talk to the quarterback and say, hey, they're in cover 3, throw it to so-and-so. So I think the solution there, which personally I want, is okay, we say we want to solve signals or lack thereof, just eliminate signals, which I would have been for back in 2020, right, when teams were stealing Michigan signals, and you still did. And, that's I go back to the competitive advantage versus competitive balance. But, just give everyone the coach to player comms.
That's what a lot of
not?
coaches I've talked to, like I've talked, because they allowed that in the bowl games when they tested it out before they made it the rule. They didn't have a limit on it, and coaches loved it. And then they set the limit for the regular season, and coaches were like, well, "No, we'd rather do this. It helps us for the reason."
It makes the most sense.
There's also those companies have like the digital wristbands, like
Yep.
that'll tell you the play on there. And I think that they tested in like D3 or D2, I want to say last year, but the NCAA, the rules committee, they've been very slow to kind of go that far in it. I don't know if it's because of a cost reasons or what, but that was one of the things I talked with you about this, Connor, like very early last season when the helmet stuff happened. You were like, this makes it easier to steal signals in some ways.
Yeah,
because
I mean,
because you can tell the quarterback like exactly what you see on the other side.
My personal, I don't say frustration. I don't know. At the end of the day, I don't really care, but it's whoa. Don't change this rule where now you can talk to the quarterback and try to say this is a solution to me and call it the Stalions rule or whatever. This is enabling signal stealing 10 times even further. So if they really care about eliminating signals, which would eliminate signal stealing, then they would give everyone the coach to player comms. Because you pull up any college football game right now, and if the offense is going relatively fast at all, even if they're not huddling and they're just aligning, they are still signaling to their players, which is forcing the defense to signal.
Right.
So every single game, with the exception of a handful, there's signals on every single play.
Yeah, and they wanted to do the helmet stuff for a long time. I'd written about it for years. The Big Ten finally pushes a trial through that's planned, and then when your whole thing comes out, that became like the reason to finish the job and make it a rule. But it had been the Big Ten had proposed this before anybody even knew about you. So it's finally here, and it continues to be adjusted. Last question. Appreciate your time. You've had a fascinating journey. You reached your dream. You went off to the military, to the Marines. It helped you coach at Michigan, which was your lifelong dream. Michigan won a national championship, even though you weren't there on the field for it. Your chances of coaching in college football probably extremely low ever again. A lot of negative things came your way. Was this all worth it? Are there any regrets you have about your time at Michigan? How do you look back on kind of your journey over the last couple of years?
I mean, I think it's still going on, right? Like is an 8-year show cause, but at the end of the day, I bought tickets to football games, right? I didn't break a law. I didn't. There's coaches that are still coaching to this day with significantly more serious violations / legal issues that are back to coaching. And, again, the appeals process is still going on. So we'll see with that. But as far as going forward, I'll be fine. I'll probably end up in the NFL, once this dies down a little bit. And I mean, at that point, the past is the past, whatever. As far as Michigan, I mean, I wouldn't say I really regret anything, because I think as more information comes out and more context is provided to everything, it was like a media attack / conclusion, right? Back in October of 23, that totally portrayed the truth in a not truthful way. And again, we'll get into it once the actual appeals process is over and the whole thing is done. But was there even a bylaw violated? And why is the NCAA very selective in their wording? you know, in their whole 70 whatever page report it is. And so, you know, I wouldn't go back and change everything or whatever. I also am not the type of person to really think about that, like control what you control. Honestly, I never even think about the question you just asked, you know, unless you ask it, right? I'm not sitting here thinking, you know, oh, could I do this? Could I do that? To me, it's irrelevant. It's what's done is done. There's no point in me thinking about something that can't be changed. So it's just really how to move forward. And I think on that topic, I go back to the PR, you know, once it dies down and or shifts a little bit, and then I move forward. The likelihood of me coaching in Michigan again, yeah, very, very low. But there have been crazier things done before.
Well, Connor, teams thanks for coming on the show. It's been a really interesting conversation. Also, some of the movers broke my vacuum cleaner. So if you know anybody, please send them my way.
another, yeah. I mean, when this is all done, we got to go like line by line on each conspiracy.
Let's do it.
Like how did this start? How did it? What actually happened?
That sounds good.
We'd love to do it. We're up for it. We'd love to do it in the future. Connor, thank you for the time. Thank you for joining Bunch Formation, and good luck in your future.
Appreciate you guys.
Thank you again to Connor Stalions for joining the show. David, I found that to be pretty insightful. He went some places I wasn't sure if he was going to go to when we first started talking, but I think kind of the ultimate feeling from him is like, he feels he didn't do anything that other places aren't doing, and that he's been railroaded for it. Now, you know, he says stuff wasn't against the bylaws. There is the bylaw against in-person scouting. That is what the NCAA has cited. But there still remains some kind of unanswered questions about all of it, partly because, as the NCAA said, him and Jim Harbaugh didn't cooperate at all. Sharon Moore deleted text messages. So, like, there's just things we're not going to know and things that Connor probably won't say. But what did you make of that conversation?
I mean, I still think, to me, the question is the one that's kind of not really answerable. We kind of got into on the show is, how much did this affect the actual bottom line of how good Michigan was? And to me, I still keep going back to them winning their two most important games of the year and then going into the playoff and winning it when all of this broke. And I think that I still think, hey, Connor arriving and the rise of Michigan paralleling that, I think there's still some fair questions about that. But the fact that this blew up and then they won all of the games that really cemented their legacy without this, I think I still see it as something that, yeah, I'm sure they were running afoul of the rules. And to be fair, you know, yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of people doing what they're doing. But that's a little bit like, you know, going 85 on the freeway and getting pulled over and then getting mad because there was 10 other cars that were going 86. It's like, you're not wrong, but also this is just kind of how things work. Like, somebody blew the whistle and you got caught and they found enough to pin you on it, and it is what it is. And so, you know, it was really interesting to talk to him about it in some detail about how the operation works and how you decipher all these things. And I think too, like, he has some points about the nomenclature in general, sign stealing versus signal deciphering. You probably heard him say that a couple times. Like, I think that's a fair debate. I don't remember really when sign stealing became like a term necessarily. It definitely predated him. Like, this was a thing.
I mean, it's from baseball, really. I mean, that's where it's, you know, more known. You know, you steal the signs from the catcher and all that kind of stuff. So it's, you know, like, and he said some stuff that was also in the Netflix documentary, which that Netflix documentary also didn't help him with the NCAA, which it cited the Netflix documentary several times in its final report. But ultimately, like, you know, and his penalty is so severe in part because he didn't cooperate at all. And that is what the unknown is going to be through all of this and will forever be. But to your point, like, and we said this when the penalties come down, I don't view that Michigan championship as illegitimate for the reason.
I don't either. I might have if they looked like a totally different team, but I really don't.
the scheme was discovered before all their big games. You know, they didn't play anybody of note before that point. They were going to beat all those teams anyway. And the fact that they beat Penn State and Ohio State and Washington and Alabama, like, and Charlie Baker himself said that. He told us that even while the investigation was still ongoing. He said to some of us reporters, you know, they won it fair and square. And I think they did. Vacating wins, I also don't think it matters. Who cares?
No, I don't care about that.
Nobody
It's
cares
an
about
interesting punishment, but
What-
like I watched the game, it happened. Promise me.
And what was most notable about Michigan's penalties was that they're being fined such a big number because the NCAA said, one, we can't cut scholarships or penalize you for that because now we have roster limits and we don't know ourselves how to handle that. So the timing of Michigan's penalties was also kind of fortuitous on that front as well. I think the weirdest part of all of it is that Sharon Moore is coaching that game this weekend against Oklahoma, his alma mater, and he's going to miss the next 2 games.
The selective suspension stuff is wild to me.
The self-selected 2-game suspension that is not your first 2 games, and then a random game next year at the beginning of the year. That is the most laughable part of this to me. And so, you know, with Connor's future, you know, I think we kind of got into it late, but like, he's not just the sign stealing guy. Like, that is his value, but he does know football and works with players and coaches and doing a lot of different things. And that is what he continues to do right now. And so he's trying to be known as just a football coach, but this, you know, sign stealing stuff is going to follow him for a long time until he gets an opportunity somewhere to show that. And I think I think
it's worth saying too, like, at his level, there's a billion Connor Stalions on college football staffs, and they're all like pretty knowledgeable about football, certainly more than most people. They're on staffs at, you know, whether it's Bowling Green or Colorado or Michigan or wherever. There's a bunch of staffers, and you want to find a way to stand out, differentiate yourself, provide value. And obviously the science thing is where he did it. But at the end of the day, it is a football coach. And so when you're a young coach coming up, you don't have experience, you don't have notoriety, you try to find your way and do all the things you can and do all the work that you can. And this was the, you know, obviously the biggest value that he provided to him. So it is, I think that you hit on an important point there in terms of how he is perceived. It's like, how good of a football coach is he ultimately? I don't know. I mean, I'm not in coaching meetings with him. I don't know. But I do know that clearly the sign stealing stuff was providing value. And so that can get you in the door to become a linebackers coach at Miami of Ohio or whatever. And people vouch for you like, hey, he's doing this or doing that. So that part of it is I think still sort of important to note.
I think there's a pretty decent shot he does end up on a staff somewhere, probably in pro football of some kind.
Yeah.
Because like, look, he's not wrong at the end. Like, there are coaches actively coaching in college football who were overseeing a team when a player died under bad circumstances, who have committed crimes or been in jail or done some things. And he's saying, look, I just taped some signals, which is true. But that goes again back to the point where it's the lack of cooperation that is ultimately what did him in. If he had come clean and done all of that stuff, his penalty is probably far less. And who knows? But on the other hand, he loves Michigan. He didn't want to throw Michigan under the bus. And so that's kind of where he's at. So I thought it was.
And it should also be noted, you know what coaches value the most from assistants and staffers from all levels?
Loyalty.
Say what you want about Connor Stalions. There's a lot to say about him. I don't think anybody can ever question his loyalty to Michigan and Jim Harbaugh in that program. I don't think that you could see any way that there's anything other than the dude like took 1,000 for the team. So, you know, it is.
We said it after the penalties. You asked me, is he the greatest college football fan in college football history? And I said, yeah, like we said, he lived out his dream. I knew so many kids growing up whose dream was to coach at Michigan and were super fans and did all that stuff. He went on a crazy path to get himself there. Michigan wins a national championship. That's the dream. Now he's blackballed for a while, but he will be a Michigan football legend for pretty much the rest of his life. And there's something to that. So found that to be an interesting conversation. Again, if you're new to the podcast, please subscribe. We got week 2 picks coming up. We got a week 1 reaction is there in the feed. We got a lot going on this season. Please hope you check out the show, like the show, got a lot going on this season. We got a lot more planned. Going to have a lot more fun. Maybe Connor will be back to talk about it more in the future when he can. Hope that's the case. So for David Ubben, I'm Chris Vannini. This is Bunch Formation. We will talk to you on the next show.
And bring back the turnover chain because I did. It's back on the shelf. You can't see it yet, but it's there. Trust me.
And